what if the epicness that we sometimes spend our entire lifetime searching for exists not in spite of the boulders, but thanks to the boulder version of you, that these boulders inspire you to become? Often, when we least expect it, life thrusts us into the role of the reluctant shiro or hero in our own story. How we respond in those moments can be the difference between thriving or just surviving. We believe that our story will be determined by how we dare to answer one burning question: how to choose to live. Join us as we explore the mindset shifts, innovative strategies, and captivating stories from my own life experience and those of my truly epic guests. So let's get this started. Welcome to today's episode of the How to Choose to Live podcast. And I am super excited once again to introduce you to yet another phenomenal human being on How to Choose to Live.
Yeah.
Today's guest is not only special because of what he does, he is a magnetism coach. He is out there to help you radiate and discover, true to my own heart, the most epic version of yourself. But something unique and really special about this individual is that if you have listened to episode 1, you know that my youngest daughter went to Yale. Well, this incredible human being went to Yale with my daughter. So he's going to tell you all about it. But this is someone who is wise beyond his years and specializes in working with professionals and entrepreneurs to really help you figure out not only how to choose to live, but how to choose to live in the most magnetic, incredibly and impactful sort of way. So let's welcome today my special guest, Mikhail Reece. Mikhail, welcome to the podcast. Woohoo!
Meredith, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to have this space. Also, it's an honor to be in this time period where we can be sitting in our respective rooms in this
Yeah.
medium, talking to each other through technology and a lot of benefits. It felt me that just hit me because I think about gratitude and how there's a lot of things like with this technology, we see a lot of the dark side of things, but we also forget about the beautiful aspect of things as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
the opportunity for connection is really, really powerful and really important. And I think, kind of to your point, Mikhail, sometimes it's interesting. We hear a lot about how isolated we feel these
Hmm.
days, and yet I think we forget how easy it has probably never been easier to text each other, to pick up the phone. You're a huge pick up the phone sort of guy.
Hmm.
To connect on Zoom where we can actually see each other. We can connect with people around the world.
Hmm.
So Mikhail, share with those of you who are listening a little bit about your story. And I already kind of gave a sneak preview that you
Yeah.
went to Yale, but how did you end up going to Yale? And then in this space where, of all the things you could choose to do at this
Hmm.
point in your life, you decided that where you really want to make your impact, where you want to leave your legacy, is in the space where you are really helping others. Was there a boulder in your life?
Hmm.
Share with us a little bit about your story.
Absolutely. I guess it all started, and this is kind of how when I speak to new clients, I kind of tell them a little backstory about why I do this, and I'll use some of that same talk track, but I'll pepper in a bit deeper elements. Um, I guess one of the things too, and we're gonna kind of get to this later, is intergenerational aspects of care because that's very present in my life. But I think about my my situation, like how I was born, right? So my mom and my dad, one of the big things in my life is comfort zone. Well, that's what I work with a lot of professionals and entrepreneurs with comfort zone and what that looks like and how we can justify and make us ourselves always seem right and just to work with the ego. But I start with the comfort zone. My dad was a little bit uncomfortable and approached my mom and he got outside his comfort zone and boom, bada bing, I happened.
Okay.
And then after that, my brother happened about a year and a half later. But my mom and dad in Jamaica, um, they my mom they weren't feeling it. My mom was like, "Hey, I'm going to go to America," and she left. And that was the first boulder I remember very vividly because my mom was, kind of upset, and I would just hear what she was saying. And I remember as a young kid, I was an observer,
Mhm.
and I always I found early on, and I remember this from very very early, like 2 years old. I just remember that um, just the different types of energies and just noticing how my mom seemed like she was in a different space. And I just remember she was saying stuff about my dad. I was like, I don't know that to be true. I mean, I'm 2 years old, but I was like, it seems like you're just upset. But I remember when we left, I remember I didn't really know if I was going to see my dad again, and that felt like pretty. I felt that was like a really deep feeling. I remember because I really liked him, and I was confused, and I was like, what's wrong? Um, so we get to the U.S. and I meet my stepfather, um, this guy from Chicago. And he's a real still close with him to this day. Spoke with him over the weekend, and my mom and he and my mom, they were together for about 8 years. I was like
Mhm.
4 at the time when they met, and he was very instrumental. He's a great man um, in my life as well. Um, but I throughout those times we moved around a lot. My mom went to St. Vincent, we went to Chicago, we went to New York. The stability and all that was my grandmother
Mm.
throughout all that. And she's man, an angel. I know everyone says their grandma's an angel, but man, I never even heard her say one bad thing about a person ever.
Mm.
She was during the 20th century, where I guess racism was just like
Yeah.
people were just it was so big and it's a higher level. People were just so big on their background.
Right.
Nationalism was so big. Being an
Right.
Italian was huge. Being a Japanese was huge. Being an American was huge.
Everything.
It was like your identity. Your identity was much more on a country basis, like where you're from, and then it was more ideological. But she had a higher thing, like where it was more spiritual. So she
Yeah.
never judged anybody. Everyone has their own journey. It was really nice to see, and that was the stability in my life. And then she actually passed. She passed from like stomach cancer. But I heard her. I used to sleep by her at night. I actually heard her dying the night. Like she's asking God, please God, take me. And I just remember I didn't like hospitals. That was like the trauma.
Mhm.
I didn't because I remember seeing her when she was dead, like that day. But I
So
did.
how old were you when she passed?
I was like 9 or 10.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think I was about to be 10. So yeah,
Okay.
but I but the thing that I realized was I hadn't I when she passed, like I didn't like hospitals, but I was like at peace with her passing. Like
Yes.
I I wasn't like distraught. Um
Yes.
and I and the crazy thing is that death is actually what mended my biological father and I's relationship because her funeral was in Jamaica and that's why I saw him for the first time again
Okay.
in like 8 years. I kind of forgot about him. I guess it was kind of traumatic and like sometimes when you have traumatic things,
Right.
like brain will just like cut it out. So,
Right.
um, but the reason I brought that up, Meredith, is because she I had a realization when I look back and I'm like, how come I was so at peace with that? I was kind of curious with myself.
Yes.
And I just had no regrets with her. I was always present
Yes.
with her. I was always there with her. I always showed her
Yes.
love. She's starting to get Alzheimer's, so she's starting to forget things. And she would she would just do things that are out of character, and I could tell it wasn't her.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's a big baseline for what I do today. I went in detail there. So fast forward, my mom was very big on getting good grades.
Mhm.
She's like, hey, if I got a 95, she's like, why wasn't it 100? Very very
Yeah.
high standards.
Yes.
And I'm a folks that may not know, I'm a big guy. I'm like about 6'6", 270. And I kept growing. I kept growing. So, and I was pretty competitive. I like to play sports. So that combination of high standards and my interests, and I also saw my mom raised me to be pretty resourceful.
Yes.
Um, and I just remember seeing, I was like I knew our financial situation wasn't great. I was very aware of that. But we were very well loved. We were rich in every way except financially.
Yes. Yes.
And but I was like, oh wow, I could play this game that I like, and I could
Yes.
possibly go to college for it. I was like, shoot,
Yeah.
I'll play football. This is fun. Like
Yes.
it sucks a lot, but it's like the running and all that stuff. But it's fun. You make a play, it's fun,
Yes.
and being with the teammates are fun. And then all that amounts to me going to Yale. And after
Yes.
as I'm going to Yale, actually, really quick thing with Skylar for the
Yes.
listeners, she was my first interaction with a Yalie, like ever.
Yes.
I saw
Yes.
her at this like bonfire at a family friends. No, it wasn't a family friend, just a friend's place.
Yes.
I think in her either in her old neighborhood or old neighbors, but she was there, and it was like Logan Marshall and Nancy Day. I don't know if you remember those guys.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that group, there was a get together, and she was there, and she just
Yes.
told me how much Yale was awesome, and she was just so positive, so energetic.
Yes.
Like wow, like shoot, like if there's more people like her, there's probably gonna be great there. So
Yes. Yes.
so I went there.
Let
Yeah.
me ask you, I mean, clearly, um, uh, being a dynamic personality man of color, did
Hmm.
you I mean, first of all, I think that how to choose to live. I mean, I remember being shocked at one point for multiple reasons. So Skylar's or speaking of Skylar, and after the boulder, you
Hmm.
can imagine, and we'll talk about intergenerational care because I think that's a big element of how to choose to live. And it's something that most of us often don't even really think about until it's on our
Hmm.
doorstep and we have to
Hmm.
think about it. Um, but one of Skylar's original caregivers was this amazing woman named Chantel. And for
Hmm.
me to trust someone with Skylar,
Hmm.
not just physically, but energetically,
Hmm.
was a big deal for me.
Hmm.
And I remember Chantel telling me that, mentioning she had um, children and two of her kids are boys.
Hmm.
And she mentioned to me, and this might have been when the whole George Floyd thing had
Hmm.
happened, and she mentioned to me having the talk
Yeah.
with her boys.
Hmm.
And I had no idea what she was
Hmm.
talking about. And I'm in my mid to late 50s,
Yeah.
Mikhail, and
Yeah.
I had no idea what she was talking about. And mind you, I mean, I am one of the last people to pay attention to skin color. To me, it is an irrelevant
Hmm.
factor in any equation. It's really it's the energy
Hmm.
that I am aware of. And she explained to me the critical need, especially, and it wasn't even like a strapping young man like yourself
Hmm.
who who uh, might be predisposed to people as quote unquote assuming the worst.
Hmm.
What how did that did first of all, I'm assuming because Chantel said no, that's kind of a rite of passage that
Hmm.
all young black men have to have.
Hmm.
Um, and what you don't understand is that every time your son goes out by himself,
Yeah.
As the mom, you're terrified,
Hmm.
is he going to come back?
Yeah.
And so I mean, you are one of the most generously hearted souls that I know. And so one, what is it like to get that
Mhm.
talk as an impressionable young man who's spiritually connected,
Yeah.
who is kind and caring? And to me, it feels like it would be this weird, harsh reality that of a level of unfairness
Yeah.
that just incomprehensible. No matter how good you are, it's almost like at a certain point, it doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
so what it can share with us a little bit, if you would, about how, if you remember getting
Mhm.
that kind of talk and what it was
Yeah.
like to be the kind of evolved soul that you are, high achiever in
Mhm.
everything that you do, and then to step out into the world. How has this impacted you and your message and your calling?
Yeah. So that's a great question because that was something that did come up. And I'd say well, my mom was it was more we didn't have a talk, but we had consistent messages about it.
Mhm.
So I was when my growing up, as I did have that interest in football, like I said, I was pretty resourceful. So I just looked up stuff online, like workouts to do to be a football player. I just did it, just did them,
Mhm.
So I would just look it up. I didn't need to be motivated. I was just like, I'll just do this thing. Um, and part of it was running aerobic exercise and jump, doing, so I would do sprints in certain open field areas. And sometimes I would do jogs. Wasn't really a big fan of jogging, just doing long distance running,
Yeah.
but sometimes I would do it. And my mom would say, "Hey, Mikhail, don't jog if it's going to be close to dusk, right? Don't give any probable cause to another
Right.
person to think like, oh, there's a kid on the run, right?
Right.
There's a young black male that's a suspect in an area. Don't give that type of." And that was one of the big consistent messages. But my mom also was in terms of the young black man, there's actually a distinction that she had where, and this is a topic that's very popular in I guess uh, black discourse on social media, is as because we're Caribbean, um we kind of have like an outsider's view of America that's a bit different.
Yeah.
And so we'll see there's certain things that are fears in the black community that we consider, but they're not as they're not as pronounced. Like they're like in some parts of the black community, there's a distrust of almost all institutions,
Mhm.
um, police, um,
Mhm.
banks, uh, schools, and for a reason. Like you'll see some of the stories, right? And
Yes.
these are like literally stories that are well documented, legal cases,
Right.
everything. And the thing about these institutions, despite them having rules, there's still always the human element and the context with which people
Right.
have. So
Right.
here's the thing: people that are even super racist on the day to day, they're not going out doing crazy racist things day to
Right.
day. The
Right.
thing is that life is up and down, and when it's on the ups, people are nice to everybody. I mean, shoot,
Right.
you've been in relationships yourself. It's easy when it's easy. When
Right.
things are going great, when you're good and they're good, the relationship is good. When you're neutral and they're neutral, and maybe they're good, the relationship's still good. But the thing um, that's not considered a lot of times is when things are really tough and bad and people are low. That's
Yes.
when usually mistakes happen. So here's just and when you said ask about the conversation, one of the things that my mom really, taught us is to be very aware and be considerate. And that's something that just in the American, like westernized civilization sometimes is forgotten. That's
Mhm.
basically the group and the energy with the group. It's more so, hey, if you take care of yourself and your personal responsibility and everyone around them is doing that, then the group should be fine. But that I don't believe that accounts for the randomness of life, um,
Mhm.
where you could just have bad sleep. There's a knocking sound. It can be um, what's his name? Avalanche effect, a snowball effect, where
Yes.
you have a bad knocking sound, and then maybe you have a young child, and then you don't have sleep, and now you're cranky. Then you get cut off twice, and then you're at work, and your manager says you missed this deadline, and now you go to lunch, and then something spills on you, and then that's when racism comes up most often, right? Now you come up and you're in this neighborhood, and there's this cop, right? And I'm not by any means justifying a cop doing bad things, but that's the randomness. That's the thing that people don't talk
Right.
about. Where and now on the flip side, you have this young black kid whose mom is struggling, and
Right.
um, he's got in a fight with his older brother, and he's upset, and he has a
Right.
girlfriend, and he's in high school, and he wants to pay this bill, and he has a little bit of weed, and he's like, let me just go sell this, and all these things. And it's not like he's like a bad kid, but there's these
Right.
elements outside of him where boom, now we have the
Right.
choice thing. Now we have a level of choice. Now when all those things are happening, and now you have these two people that are essentially battered by the day, and they run into
Right.
each other. That's when fireworks,
Right.
um, and there's a collision. And now it's a battle of just ego and feel like I want to win, feel like I gotta, I need to get
Right.
some, like I just want to feel like I have some control in my life.
Right.
And
Right. And that's a really important point that you're touching on because um anger I mean our emotions are a guidance system, and
mhm,
when used well, as you know, Mikhail, and as if you don't know this, as you're listening to this, our emotions, when used well, I underline that about 10,000 times,
yeah,
when used well, are like the hot and cold game. And the emotions that we call negative emotions, negative is actually a misplaced word in that. They're the
yeah,
emotions that don't feel good
mhm,
for a reason because we're not intended to stay there,
right,
right? They can even have value in their ability to direct us, like the
mhm,
hot and cold game, that we're getting cold.
right,
We're
right, right,
disconnecting ourselves from the emotion that will help us achieve the things that we truly do want to experience. And even anger has a value because anger is really valuable at helping you kind of like press the reset start
mhm,
button and get your sense of power back. The
mhm,
trick is simply not to stay there, now to
right.
continue moving up the emotional
And,
ladder.
and to be curious, I think that's one of the things too that
Yes.
and that's one of the things that I have to definitely acknowledge. Some of the privilege I have is some folks weren't raised to be curious. Like,
Yes.
so this can be something that could be like a generational thing that people don't even realize. But my mom, like I said, she told us to be very resourceful. So when we had a question, this is before so I'm 31.
Yes.
When we had a question, she was like, "Go look it up when we go to the library," like because before the internet, like in the late
Yes. You're
'90s, before
right. Yeah.
internet. So so we would have to first of all sit and wait and be okay with that unknowingness. That was a little
Yes.
uncomfortable for me. I was
Right.
wanting to know the answers. Sit and be patient in the unknowingness. Then put in the effort to go find it somewhere, and knowing that you may not find it, and then be willing to look it up. And then if you don't find it, just be okay with like
Yes.
that thing being and I guess still an open item in your mind. And but the curiosity around your emotions is really big too. That's one of the things that is really central in my coaching and even choosing is like, hey, let's not make or demonize ourselves for a mistake or doing things. Just get curious. What does that mean? What about this thing triggered me? What does this emotion have? And some folks, they stop at the fact that this person, this event, this is wrong, this is bad.
Right.
And sometimes you really don't know what's good or bad for you until 10 years down the line. That bad
Exactly.
thing could have been the best thing that happened to you,
Exactly.
right? And I that's one of the really big things. And sorry to cut you off, Meredith, was
No, that's perfect.
just the curiosity element, um, because I believe it starts with having some awareness, but awareness means nothing if you're not curious about it.
Right.
And that's a really big aspect in choice is where are you choosing from? That's a question we really ask a lot, in our coaching practice is like, where are you choosing from? What type of
Right.
energy are you choosing from? Are you choosing from a more fear-based, almost restricted type of place?
Right.
We're coming from more of an abundance, what's possible type of space.
Right.
And yeah, being curious is super, super central. I mean, some of the best entrepreneurs, some of the best leaders, curiosity and courage too, having the courage.
So
Yeah,
so so your specialty is helping people really discover,
mhm,
identify the qualities that make them charismatic, that
for sure.
make them more magnetic to
Absolutely.
other people. Define charisma for me. What do you think is charisma?
Yeah. So first of all, charisma, it's subjective, right? There is a
Yes.
dictionary term, but for me, charisma, and one of my best friends, he and I were talking about it, but there's a bit of mystery in charisma.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of, so I'm this big strapping guy and everything, but I'm not opposed to crying. Like,
Yeah.
I try to cry at least once or twice a month, and I've cried in front of people. Um, I have the privilege of being a big guy. Some people think I'm attractive, and that helps out. So I can maybe have some privilege where other people wouldn't give me as much flack. But charisma to me operates on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's think about the bad boy example. Like a lot of, I guess, in heterosexual relationships, or there's the good girl and she likes the bad boy.
Yeah.
Now, the good girl doesn't like the bad. The good girl would feel scared of the if the bad boy was bad to her all the time. She'd be like, I just need to avoid that.
Yes.
But the what makes the bad boy charismatic is the fact that he's a bad boy, but he's sweet to her.
Mm-hmm.
He's sweet to her. So there's a sweetness in the bad boy, and what that mean what how I look at that, that's a spectrum. That's like a distance and an emotional, um I guess I could say an emotional space that's filled with
Mm-hmm.
bad boy, semi-bad, neutral, and then sweet, and that makes someone charismatic. Where there's an ability to show that they're not just the super positive go lucky, but there's also a viciousness that they have. And like, oh wow.
So d- let me reflect back to you what I feel that I am hearing you say under and that's a great example, um, is that ultimately one of the big contributing factors for charisma is the ability to look at someone, to enter someone else's space,
Hmm.
giving off the resonance that I see you.
Hmm.
I see you.
Hmm.
I hear you. I
Yeah.
get you. I understand you and you matter to me.
Hmm.
So what I feel like you're describing in that example and what you're alluding to in whether it's the business world or whatever is the
Hmm.
person that can walk into a room, one being fully present, and make the people in that space feel like they matter, basically,
Yeah.
that they're being heard, that
And
they
it's a very spirit. It's like a very kind of like it's hard to even describe. And that's one of the things about having your awareness and being curious about yourself, because everyone has a different version of it.
yes,
um, but I believe it comes from the courage to accept yourself, because you give that, like, I'll tell
yes,
you what people say with me. It's like they'll be like, I felt like I've met you before,
yes,
you seem familiar. And my theory on that is the fact that one of the things I do is, there's a lot of performative living that human beings have, where traditionally men want to be more masculine, be macho, and sometimes that what that transpires to be is them not considering more of, I guess, their feminine energy. I think both
Yeah.
men, women, everyone, they come from man and woman, and that
Yes.
you're gonna have masculine energy because there's and it does actually have to do with if the man because some men have a lot of feminine energy, some women have a
Yeah.
lot of feminine energy, but it's just a combination. But denying yourself of one form of energy is,
Right.
from how I see, denying yourself from a whole spectrum of experience in this realm.
Yes.
And so one thing with me is I try to be very aware and accept the full range of my energy. And that
Yes.
in turn helps people feel like he accepts me because they can see some of themselves in me,
Yes.
which
Yes. And
is
I think,
yeah.
probably without even knowing it,
Mhm,
you've identified a trap of that our language can give us. And
mhm,
so by identifying a specific type of energy
mhm.
as feminine,
Right.
the man who wants to be strong is
Mhm,
automatically going to avoid that because if he demonstrates that type of behavior, to your point, crying,
mhm,
it's, I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, I know you, but some people would interpret a man like you have to give a disclaimer when you say, I make it a point to cry once a month. It's
mhm.
almost like I'm still a manly man,
Right, right.
but there's a but in there.
Mhm,
And and when do we get to the level as human beings where we realize that we are whole human beings and that
right.
if we are truly going to show up as the most epic version of ourselves, we are whole beings, whether we're walking into work or
Mhm,
whether we're with our grandmother or with
mhm,
our children or our pets or with a stranger out on the curb outside, and that being kind
mhm.
or being present is not a masculine or feminine energy. It is
Right,
it is the kind in humankind.
right.
And so I love the light that you shone on that. And I think it feeds into our discussions about choice
For sure.
and to choose to acknowledge that there are certain, even what you talked about before going back thousands of years. I don't remember whether it was Socrates or Hobbes, but these are
Mhm,
philosophers from thousands of years ago who really studied when a good man, using the man
mhm.
terminology, when a good
Yeah,
man does bad things, does that make that person a bad man?
mhm.
It has been a question for
Yeah,
way back, right? And so I think it's our language. Language is a wonderful thing in that it can help
mhm.
us compartmentalize things, and yet it can also inadvertently skew us up for blind spots and bias.
For sure.
And
Absolutely.
absolutely. And so therefore, it's when we feel disrespected, for example, well, that behavior lines up with all the boxes that we've been taught to check. That
Mhm.
means we're disrespected. To your point, they could just be having a bad day. Their
For
children,
sure.
they didn't
Never, I
sleep,
mean,
they were cut off in traffic.
the 4 agreements, you've probably heard of that. Yeah,
Yes,
4 agreements.
yes,
One of the rules is never assume,
right.
and it's hard. It's hard to do that, and one of the things too is,
And that's an assumption right
right,
there, that it's
right,
hard,
right,
right?
yeah, exactly. No, and
Right?
it's so
Right?
ingrained, and I'm thinking and it's crazy because the language, the language, my my first thing was like, "Oh, man," that based on, of course, just past, right? And that's
Yes.
past and all those things, like, that's not where possibility lives. First of all, I wanna say that. And the assuming one of the things too, I wanna give humanity grace because we've definitely innovative and advanced a lot, and I think we're in the middle of this energy language experiment,
Yes.
because literally just 2 generations ago, like we are just talking about the nationalism and everything, like a generation and a half. My grandfather just turned 100. He's still alive, so that's a really,
Yes.
really great thing. And he was a lawyer, one of the first black lawyer from Tobago, from Trinidad and Tobago. So he's done some cool things, and he's helped represent bankers' rights in the Caribbean. But just that same guy had so many children outside of his marriage with my grandmother. Um,
Yes.
and it goes to that point about and he was a powerful man with influence. And some people, they just say that's what powerful men do, right?
Yes.
Like, and so there's that all these different stories and these contexts we have, and in that in that time period, he wasn't like he was a great man, and he was kind of he wasn't the
Right.
best family man. However, I'm saying that because he's still alive, and
Yes.
he didn't think he would see Obama as president, right? So there's been a lot of progress, and so I think the language and the energy. I believe I do want to acknowledge the positive track that we're on
Yes.
because, right, being a life like there probably 20 years ago, someone said, "Hey, basically the pop culture term is I'm a life coach, I'm a
Yeah.
magnetism coach," but being that, people would be like, "Is that even a real job?"
Right.
And now we're getting in a place where there's a lot of advancements, there's a lot of AI, there's a lot of help. I
Right.
believe we're going to trend towards a lot of more support of helping the human experience because we've advanced a lot, man. Our forefathers, our foremothers. Is there
Yes.
speaking of inclusivity? Is there a term for
Right.
that?
Well,
For
yeah, and kind of to your point, um, it wasn't that long ago
mhm,
where g quality of life
yeah,
was kind of a bouge
mhm,
sort of concept. It was really survival. It was, are you getting
yeah,
your crops to grow?
right,
I mean, hand washing your if you wanted to wash your clothes, you hand wash them. I mean,
for
I
sure.
remember
My
until
grandma still does
I
that in Jamaica to this day. Yeah,
yes,
like
yes, yes,
she
and
had 88, like literally.
yes, 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 and I mean, and I remember, as a child going into my friend's home and seeing an old like, there was a wringer thing where
Mhm,
you would put your clothes through and it would wring it to get
mm,
a lot of the moisture out. I mean, there were some wild and I mean, and I knew people who had outhouses,
right,
I mean,
right, yeah.
and it's
You're
not
you're from
that long
Florida,
ago.
correct?
I'm in Florida.
No, no, I know you're in Florida, but your folks from Florida.
Oh, 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 no, no, no. No, no. So I like to some people are military brats. I like
Mhm.
to joke that I was an entertainment brat. So
Ah,
my
that's very
parents
nice. Mhm,
were, my mom who is uh highly accomplished and turning 90 herself.
mhm.
Um she was both of my parents went to Eastman School of Music and were
Right,
trained
right,
in the
yeah.
arts. My mom has always been a fat both parents have incredible voices. My mom went into the performing aspect of the arts and my
Mhm,
father went into the administrative aspect of the arts. And
mhm,
so I grew up when my dad running this huge amphitheater in upstate New York, Saratoga Performing Arts
mhm,
Center
mhm,
in Saratoga Springs. And so
mhm,
literally, and this, again, it's interesting how we have big boulders in our lives that we can pinpoint. Yes, that led me toward that.
mhm.
But we have these little pebbles along
Yeah,
the way,
yeah.
right? And for me, growing up backstage and
Mhm,
not only seeing some of these big celebrities, the Frank Sinatras, the Janis Joplins,
mhm.
and seeing who they were as human beings,
Yeah,
in some cases, what substance abuse did, and
mhm,
also seeing audience members, random people whose lives were changed permanently
mhm,
as a result of their substance abuse. And
mhm.
there was a woman who thought she could fly. She was on an acid trip and she jumped off the
Yeah,
second balcony
right.
and was
Mhm,
horribly injured. I mean, so there are things like that that help weave our paths
Mhm.
along, but again, it's, um, kind of to your point, they're the deliberate choices
For
that
sure.
we have the opportunity, and I so embrace, what you're saying, like the choices that we have made, the biases that we have, and some are generational
Mhm.
biases, and yet we do have the opportunity to grow. And I'm a firm believer that we have mentors who really are instrumental and help us go further faster,
Mhm.
um, and help us having to make every single mistake on
Mhm.
our own. We can learn from them. However, I also really firmly believe that we have very powerful anti-mentors or
Mhm.
anti-mentor experiences that
Mhm.
sometimes are even more powerful than the mentors, because it's so crisp and clear what we do not want that the
Mhm.
likelihood of us inadvertently going that direction can be diminished. And
Mhm.
like you, I believe that we are really in a time, and I get so excited when I see someone, especially in your generation, who is not waiting until their 50s or
Mhm.
60s or 70s to have this connection, this insight, this charisma,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Mhm.
and to understand that, for me, the T in grit, um, is that understanding that transformation is as simple as making a different choice right
Mhm.
here in this moment.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and it's something that sometimes it can feel heavy and how you perceive it. However, it's the choice, and I actually want to talk about one of the choices I guess I recently went through regarding like the intergenerational care. So choice, I made a choice that I wanted to um, be intentional and support my mom as she got diagnosed with breast cancer last year, and she's now cancer free. So it's a beautiful
Yes.
thing. But sometimes you can be intentional, be at cause regarding what you want to do to support something, and sometimes you may not get the result. And a lot of times, we can be result oriented. Um, However, that was something I was deliberate about, and it felt really good,
Yep.
and very fulfilling.
Yes.
My mom, she turned 64 this past Saturday, and I was mentally preparing. I was like, man, worst case scenario, if something
Right.
happened with her surgery or something, to her double mastectomy, because she was very allergic to latex and all these different things that are needed for the surgery.
Yes.
I was like, man, I don't, do I have any
Yeah.
regrets? And I had a couple, but I was like, I've been pretty present with her. But yeah, being at choice and choosing. Um, I mean, one of the things that comes up a lot when I'm talking to clients is sometimes um, we get to points where there's no other choice but that one choice, and our back is
Right.
against the wall. And usually whenever we only have that one choice, we always figure it out.
Right.
Um, Sometimes the optionality with many choices causes us to not choose at all, and
Right.
that's one thing that I would encourage people to be curious about is what are you not choosing
Right.
space right now? What are you allowing the environment and the situations around you to dictate your choices? And
Yes.
I've definitely been someone that I've fallen into that in different parts of my life myself. Definitely don't want to speak out like I'm from, oh, I always choose the right thing, because I definitely don't. However, I'm curious
Yes.
about my choices, and then I choose to be come from a certain place with most of
Yes.
my choices, and that's something that I'm really proud of. And with in terms of the intergenerational care, my lifestyle took a bit of a starting this business. It felt a bit risky at first, and I did it. If anyone's starting a business, do anything, I tell you, I started a business probably the worst financial standing. I'm about $25,000 in debt. Never been in debt. I was always really good. I was making a couple hundred grand a year when I was working my corporate job. Um, had a bunch of credit cards. Now credit
Mhm.
card score isn't great. So all these things that financially are part of that could be that shows some of your choices. I'll tell you straight up. I didn't make great choices with that part of my life. However, those can be fixed.
Yes.
Like me, me not feeling like I did everything that I could do in respect to making sure my mom was good and her energy was good and
Yes.
she could recover is
Yes.
something that I was willing to be like, that's a sacrifice I'll take
Yes.
every day, every year I look back. And um, that's one thing that I definitely, for anyone that's viewing this is understand your priorities, especially for me, taking care of my mom was a very big priority. And there's a few things in my lifestyle that changed, but it is, that has now propelled me and given me so much more juice
Yes.
to conquer and know that, wow, like a lot of the places that I feel like my need, like where I need to, a lot of places where felt like I needed to be in order to get my needs met was
Yes.
absolutely confinements that I just placed on myself. They were all mental, and
Yes.
I just certain experiences. So yeah, I believe you know it's so weird because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm basically her dad right now. Like just certain times I'm like, you shouldn't eat this, mom, and let's wait till this point. And I'm pretty strict when she likes her breads and her candies, and I just throw them away. No
Yeah.
executive decision. Like we're not eating that. You bought it, cool. She's like,
Yeah.
Mom, Mikhail. She's like a Caribbean accent. She's like, Mikhail, don't
Yeah.
throw it away. It's a waste of money. And it's like, well, guess what? That health is money is man-made. Health is you can't really get that back. So we're throwing
Right.
this, and
Right.
so it's a really interesting place to be, especially when I'm starting this business because it creates a um, just like an inner battle that I have at times, and then I get curious and I'm like, well, what am I priority? What am I aligned to right now? And then
Right.
happens that clarity allows me to, I don't even think about it.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
I love it. So before I ask you the final questions, which
Mhm.
I ask everyone, um, if so let me ask you one more question regarding charisma.
Yeah.
Um, and charisma, I mean, I kind of call that the booyah energy, right? And
Mhm.
I think you've nailed it in that, first of all, it comes, I mean, it non-negotiable with charisma is
Mhm.
a certain level of getting to just acknowledge
Mhm.
that you as a human being,
Mhm.
yourself, is pretty frickin' epic, and that
Yeah.
epic does not equal perfect. Perfectly imperfect is the magic. It's
Mhm.
that you still have some things, some opportunities ahead, right? So when you are coaching someone, I mean, clearly when someone is charismatic, it's going to help you personally, it's going to help your
Mhm.
spiritually, it's going to help
Mhm.
you professionally, and it's also going to help you in serving others because again, it's what we talked about earlier. It's showing up, being really present. So when you're coaching people, what are a few things that you start with to help them discover and or expand on their charisma factor?
Yeah, so that's excellent because one thing when you're charismatic, because I don't like to shut off parts of myself, but is but that's part of my spectrum that I guess people there's a part of my spectrum, I don't know where we would place it, so we're not going to place it anywhere, whether masculine or feminine. But sometimes just direct, and I let them know, hey, I'm going to be direct, and it's cool for you if you don't like this, maybe you're uncomfortable. I preface that I'm going to be direct, and I'm like, the first thing is like, I'm going to be your coach first, not your friend.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I think I think that type of upfront communication is very helpful, because a lot of the problems I've noticed are usually just breakdowns of communication where there's an
Yes.
expectation, and it's like, hey, that was mean, or you did this. Like, oh, well, listen, we're learning each other, and I always create space for, like, hey, I may mess up, and we can talk about this. But the first thing is, there may be a time where I have to be curious or skeptical, because there's going to be some biases. There's going to be some um what's the word? Not hidden. Um, what's I'm forgetting the word. But basically, blind spots.
Oh,
You
yeah.
may
Yeah.
Yeah, you may have some blind spots, and we may not uncover that unless we're skeptical about
Right.
what you're seeing. And that skepticism, when the person is being very vulnerable, can seem like almost like an attack if you're not that comfortable in that space.
Mhm.
And being direct and saying that, hey, this is something that may happen, that helps with the charisma of me being like, hey, I'm myself, and hey, I might get excited, or hey, I might get this. But we're taught to be as neutral as possible, but to be supportive. um so I'd say that's one of the main things. But you know owning everything, ownership, owning that I can be intentional, that's a big thing too. For me, like, so if I'm with a client and I'm 1 minute late, like, for what the meeting's just starting, I actually asked them, is, in service like, we had a commitment to start at this time. I make sure that I'm communicating, but in service of that, like, how do you relate to this thing? Like, does this make you feel uncomfortable? But really getting curious, being able to talk through even the smallest of things that sometimes you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. But in the back of their head, that might matter.
Yep.
But they've
Right.
been
Mhm.
taught to be like, oh, don't bring it up yet. So, for me, I definitely preach prefacing, because it's okay to be direct. It's absolutely fine. Um, but it's about communicating in a way like, hey, we're going to get here, and asking for permission if this is okay if we do this here.
Mhm.
I think those are some of the biggest things. Is that's how you can maintain your charisma. It's absolutely okay to be your full self, and you're responsible for what your full self may induce in a group as well. As a leader, you're responsible for that. The second you open your mouth, the second you bring yourself into another person's presence, you are now sharing that responsibility with the group, and owning that, and be willing to address that, and be willing to apologize if you do offend, and get curious about that. I think all go in part of it. So where it's cool to be that big personality, but sometimes let's get curious about what that may be doing to impact others in the group.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that is so it is so important, and to realize that our words are not just simply words. They
Mhm,
are, they have invisible stories for
mhm,
everyone attached to them. And
mhm,
I think one thing, kind of, as far as being direct, if you're listening to this, I think that sometimes people equate that terminology with harsh, and
correct.
that
Yeah.
it, and it
I like to use
and
the word clear sometimes too, because I have that's something I do run into. There is but yeah. Mhm,
yes, and I think that sometimes, whether it's in our personal lives or in our professional lives, we can um, v- we can overlook the necessity of also w- balancing the direct statements
mhm,
with the supportive statements too,
mhm,
and remembering that if you, rather than calling it a tough talk that you have to have with someone, if you're having an important talk, a breakthrough talk,
mhm,
remember that to your point of the four agreements, the assumption, I like to
Mhm.
say one of my big three questions is what might I be assuming that is not necessarily true? And I might be assuming, because it's so solid in me, that you know that I respect you and value you. So I'm not going to say anything because
Mhm.
it's such a truth to me.
Mhm.
However, if I call you into my office, or if we're in a relationship and I immediately get direct and
Mhm.
say, Mikhail, you did not meet that deadline.
Yeah.
Uh, that's really going to be an issue for us. What's up? Why didn't that happen?
Mhm.
Instead of prefacing it with, Mikhail, thank you so much for meeting me with me. First of all, I just want to acknowledge you and your team have really been clearly busting
Mhm.
your tail on this project, and I know we all want to see it done. So the reason I called you in here is we didn't hit that deadline.
Mhm.
Share with me what worked, what didn't work here,
Mhm.
and how can we do this differently? So therefore, I'm direct because I'm
Mhm.
addressing what needs to be addressed.
For sure.
Yet my directness isn't limited only to the harsh stuff. Like you
For
should
sure.
be able to take it.
For
And
sure.
and knowing you and your level of energy and charisma, it's really important, I think, that people understand. I mean, clearly, Mikhail, um, you've got that charisma. You're strong. You're empowered. You just have a presence to you. And so I think it's really important that as you are listening to this, watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube and you see Mikhail, that this is a man. Remember at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about who considers it part of who he is to cry,
Right.
right? So I think that the strength is being able to, and charisma is being able to be that full expression of yourself, which is so amazing that you're doing that work and you're such a great role model, even for those who would be older than you are, just to show up. So I really acknowledge you for that, Mikhail. You're just such a great member of humankind. So
Yeah.
on that merry
Yeah.
note, let's shift into the final questions that I ask to all of my guests.
Mhm.
Um, and the first one is, I want you to imagine now that the clock has spun 1,000 years ahead. And for whatever reason, all of the resources for human beings that would touch upon how to choose to live have been obliterated. And you are able, through some sort of miracle, to grace them with three things to get them started in making that choice of how to choose to live. What
Mhm.
three little nuggets of wisdom would you share with
Mhm.
someone to help them choose how to live in a way so that they can feel that they have truly been alive and lived epically?
Yeah. Give me like 10 seconds to think
I
this through
know.
'cause
It's
I
a
wanna I wanna make sure I capture this in this moment. I'm choosing right now to
Yes,
truly capture the full essence of that question.
yes.
So awareness, developing some type of system of awareness. So if we're 1,000 years later, I mean, assuming it's not the only one human being left or something, and there's like a group, there's like some form of community. Um, having a system of awareness. So in the modern day, some folks they leverage partners.
Mhm.
or they leverage friends. I would encourage, if there's a way, leveraging someone that is like impartial to you.
Mhm.
Someone, because a partner can be helpful, but it's hard for a partner to really. It can just get really sticky and icky, and you get to pointer finger pointing and stuff. And people in your family, they may have an idea of you that they don't want to let
Right.
go of. Friends, similarly, you are when you have those certain relationships, you are tied to that person, and they may have an emotional attachment to a version of you, to where it's hard for them to give you a critical, I guess, analysis or opinion. Or and
Right.
everyone has their stuff, so this is just the best way to be as objective. So I'd say something where you could find some awareness, develop some
Mhm.
awareness. Second, curiosity. That comes up a lot, but seriously being curious. And one thing I would add, almost like a neutral curiosity, not to where things are good or bad, but it's just information. They're just experiences, just information and experiences. Having neutral words to be curious around. Um, and those are neutral to my point of view, because those words
Yeah.
not might be neutral to you, but having some words that some way to be curious and consistently curious.
Yes.
Sometimes we shut down, um, and sometimes we may not want to even look at things, but just know that we talk about choice a lot.
Yep.
There is a consequence of not choosing.
Absolutely. That is a choice.
Yep, and that's a choice, and that's something that I definitely hope rings true. Even 1,000 years from now, and then action. Um, the thing that the aspect I think that we're in now is we're overwhelmed with so much information, and everyone's a
Yeah.
self-prescribed therapist, and everyone can tell that they have ADHD, and everyone can,
Right.
and we're in this era where there's a lot of ways for us to tap into information and find
Mhm.
things out and understand patterns. However, the subconscious mind, if you're not actually taking action, you're not even fooling yourself, man. The
Yeah.
subconscious mind knows you're not doing a damn thing, And I would
Yeah.
say, so I would say, one thing a lot of, especially successful people will go through things and they will maybe throw money at it, or they'll just get busy. They'll be like, oh, this happened, and I started this new project.
Right.
Taking action after you have that awareness and that curiosity, but actually taking action and doing that consistently, you'd be surprised at how much that will impact you. Um, but I definitely, there's definitely, for any of the listeners, one question I ask is, hey, did you actually address this, or did you just get busy?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people will, say this thing happened, and then the next thing you know, a year goes by, and then they actually come to terms with it when they have a quiet time. And you know how that happens? The entire world did it during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We finally got some time to be quiet, and a lot of people reflected and really had time to
Right.
reflect. That they weren't on go go go, and people were like, "Yo, this doesn't align with me anymore." A lot
Right.
of relationships ended, a lot of relationships started,
Yep.
there's a lot of change, but having
Yeah.
that time to take action after you have the awareness and curiosity, I think those are the things where you will really be able to choose. If you're looking at how to choose, um, I think those three steps: awareness, curiosity, action, that could be applied into any human being, any place. Um, I mean, the awareness piece, you probably need some others, but the curiosity
Yes.
and the
Yes.
action, that's
Yeah.
you.
Yes. I think that is so aligned with exactly what I have experienced, also observed,
Mhm.
is that awareness. It really even, I think there's a quote that is attributed to Einstein that's very similar, that addresses that, and that really talks about you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created that problem. And I don't care how many YouTube videos you
Mm-hmm.
watch. And to your point, your friends and family, and even to a certain extent, the other people in your organization,
Hmm.
they all have a skin in the game.
Hmm.
Therefore, they cannot be their sweet spot is not telling you what your blind spot is.
Right.
And
Hmm.
so that's really the value, and that's why, I mean, my gosh, the some of the most elite football players, as you know, th- th- eh, they don't go out there without not just one coach, but very specific. There's a coach for the defense. There's a
Hmm.
coach for the offense. There's
Absolutely.
a pitching coach. There's
Hmm.
a batting coach. I mean, there are people who specialize in that, and your own momentum, your own performance is going to be infinitely better when you realize, why wouldn't you give yourself access to a coach for your most valuable resource, and that is your IT, your inner technology, getting your it together, right?
Hmm.
So the last question, Mikhail, is I really believe that we have one goal and one goal only.
Hmm.
Everything else along the way is an opportunity, an objective, a target, the next finish line. And that one goal is to be taking our last breath, saying, oh my gosh, this was truly freaking epic. I hope I have the chance to do this again.
Hmm.
And so for you, if there were, say, three things from where you sit right now,
Hmm.
that if you knew that a boulder was going to fall on you at some point today, to be able to look back on your life knowing that you have truly lived, what would those three things be?
Yeah, I would say Mikhail. People would say Mikhail made me feel at home with myself.
Mhm.
I felt at home with who I was. The second thing is he he had such a light relationship with his ego.
Mhm.
Um, like I want to ego is such an interesting thing. I mean, when you look at these organizations, some of the most powerful groups of people and organizations, they crumble just because of ego.
Mhm.
Everything there, it's just two people can't agree, and
Yeah.
it's for ego. Um, and I think that's something that you know, ego work with ego. I have a few ways that I want to address that in my life, and then lastly, that fun. Like people thought about him as fun. Like
Mhm.
me as like this guy. He was a fun dude. Like he had his moments when he was serious, but man, we laughed and we enjoyed ourselves. Like we had fun together. There was really, um, big belly laughs were part
Yeah.
of engagements. I believe those three things. I forgot the first one, but the ego, the fun, and people feeling at home.
Yes.
Yeah, those would
Yeah.
be the three things.
I love it. That's so such a gem. Such a gem. So, Mikhail, if people want to work on their charisma, they want to find you, they want to follow you, where can they find you, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, I have a website, integrowcoaching.com, www.integrowcoaching.com, integrowcoaching.com. Calendly link, and then my Instagram, R3Es, two C's, CC, and then EE again, REEECCEE. And it's at Reece, how I spelled it.
Great. Well, Mikhail, it has been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. And I just know that you're going to be out there making an amazing impact on lives
Yes,
in multiple sort of ways. And if you have been watching this, I know that you know someone who would benefit from this conversation. So please send it along to them, pass it along, share, like, leave us a review, and of course, subscribe
there you
to How to Choose to Live podcast, and come back next week and we will have another amazing guest for you, like Mikhail. So, and be sure
go.
to follow him and get pumped up, and you go on out there and do something epic.
Yes, right.
So it's time for your big mission for the day. And of course, today's podcast was all about getting curious. So here's your bonus tip. Here is your action step, your mission for today. I want to encourage you to step forward from this moment with a little bit more curiosity. I'm talking about being curious about yourself. What is motivating the thoughts? Are you just letting your thoughts run on autopilot? Are you letting your thoughts run on habit or even on some generational trauma? What is igniting the pattern of thoughts, the way that you're seeing your world right here, right now? So get curious about your own emotions, about, to Mikhail's point, your own triggers. What is triggering you? Is it a positive trigger? Is it making you feel great? Is it a negative trigger? And your power of choice. Can you choose to shift your focus on the presence of more positive triggers so that you become more magnetic, more charismatic as you walk out into the world, as you trigger that more epic version of yourself that's empowered, purpose driven, innovative, and collaborative? And speaking of collaborative, part two of this mission is, how can you step out into the world a little bit more curious about the world around you, the people, the places, the things, even the animals, the world itself? Get curious. And how can you help those things, even the animals, even the rocks and the trees around you, how can you expand the kind in humankind and help the world around you simply by your presence, your deliberate focus, feel heard, feel understood, and feel like they matter? So I'm Meredith Alexander, CEO of Grit Mindset Academy. Today is your moment to step out into the world fully alive and go do something epic. And remember, if this episode inspired you, or if you know someone that you think would benefit from it, please go out there, pick one person to share this podcast with, and subscribe and comment. Let me know what questions are rumbling for you today. But most of all, get curious and go out and, again, do something epic. See you next week.